Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for objection handling and why it's so much harder for pre-sales with Don Carmichael. This is a part of the Scaling Pre-Sales webinar series presented by Consensus. My name is Sammy Focarino. I'm the Senior Events Manager here at Consensus, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software. We wanted to let you know about our largest event of the year that is coming up in May. DemoFest is the largest pre-sales focused event happening May 18th and 19th with over 50 respected thought leaders, including Don, presenting all sessions live. And the best part is it's totally free. If you're a Consensus user, be sure to ask your CSM about the special customer day on May 17th. I'll post the link to register in the chat box. We encourage you to participate in today's webinar. Our speaker will answer any questions at the close of the session, but you're welcome to post your questions at any time through the Q&A box on the right side of your console. If at any time you're having technical difficulties, press the help button on the right side of your screen. We're excited to be here today with Don Carmichael. Don is a pre-sales coach, trainer, and keynote speaker, and the founder and chief pre-sales evangelist at Winning Skills Ltd. After a 30-year pre-sales career, including heading EMEA pre-sales enablement at both SAP and Oracle, Don founded Winning Skills to elevate the pre-sales skill set and help take the profession and craft forward as buyer enablers. Don has taught pre-sales skills at Adobe, Deloitte, SurveyMonkey, Sage, Freshworks, Concur, and many, many others. Don is co-host of the Two Pre-Sales in a Pod podcast series, has his own hashtag on LinkedIn, hashtag presales by Don Carmichael, and regularly contributes to web events. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Don.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Wow, you seem to know more about me than I do. Let me make sure, let's get sharing out. Okay, there we go. Brilliant. So thank you so much for joining this. I'm just loving this opportunity to be able to share something that I'm actually really passionate about, objection handling. And as it says there, why is it different for us as pre-sales people? Because it is, and we'll go into what the difficulty with that is. So now you can see something weird on the top there, can't you? A thing called pitch. P, and it's got really weird spelling as well, and it's got 3 I's in it. So presumably one of the things you'd quite like to know is, what does that actually stand for? So I'll tell you that up front, and then we'll kind of dig into what each of these steps is, because it's a methodology, it's a process for handling an objections. And on the way, on our journey today, we'll also talk about things like what's the difference between a question and an objection, which you'd think could be pretty obvious, but sometimes isn't. And also the world of objections in buyer enablement. We've always thought of objections as, okay, stressful, but a good thing, because, we're engaging with the client. But in a buyer enablement world, we perhaps got a different way of kind of thinking about this. The other thing, by the way, is I'm using Scrabble kind of letters there. I hope I'm allowed to do that. So if you actually total up the points of pitch, it comes to 14 points. So we'll come back to that, because that's important that you do the full 14 points. If you're going to use this process, you can't use parts of it. You have to use the whole thing. So what does it stand for? So the P stands for pause. Silence, that's very common in a lot of other objection handling techniques, and I'll explain why you're doing that. So that's really important that you pause when an objection happens. The first I stands for interest, which is showing some interest, genuine curiosity in what the client has actually just said. Then it goes intent, which is the search for the deeper meaning. What do you really mean by this? And does that vary by who's asked the question and what role they've actually got? Okay, so this is all about, empathy, listening skills, and digging deeper. What is it that they actually said? How did they say it? What's going on? What's the context with this question? And then there's a stage called implications, this is a bit that's pretty unique for people who are in a technical selling role, because implications is all about what should you have been thinking all the time from the point they said the objection through pause, interest, and intent. And it's all about, what can I do? What is going to happen next? What can I offer to not just counter or answer the objection, and what will what could I assume to happen after that? And am I ready? Am I prepared? And again, we'll dig in deeper and actually have a look at that. All objection handling techniques have like a tell thing, which is once you've done all this process, is what is it that you actually tell, what is the answer, or what is it that you're actually going to do, tell it back to the client. And some objection handling techniques don't have this at the end, which is check, which is making sure, getting a positive response from the client. Did that really answer your question? So like I said, if you tell all that up, that's 14 points. So objection handling is widely taught across the tech industry to sales teams, but you don't often hear it taught to pre-sales kind of sales engineers. And if they do, you might get taught it, but you'd never get any more coaching on it, or workshopping or additional materials. And that's a real shame. And you see a lot of people getting taught objection handling techniques for use in like closing or cold calling. And if I draw on what other companies do, so Oracle, I don't know if they still do, but they used to teach a technique called search, which stood for silence, echo, ask, respond, and check. And you can see there's some similarities there. I've just kind of developed things a little bit further. And I've also seen it taught us kind of do nothing silence. Again, you can see that. Acknowledge the objection, curiosity. You can see there's common language here. Response and move on. It doesn't have like a check phase to it at all. So thank you so much to Sammy, who gave an absolutely brilliant introduction to myself. Was it they always say, don't have a slide with loads of logos on. It's kind of really bad form in sales. So I'll break the rules straight away, but here's a load of logos. So thanks to Sammy, you can see some of the companies I've worked with. I've worked for SAP and Oracle. At SAP, spent 7 years as the head of pre-sales development for EMEA, which was an absolutely fascinating role and completely different job from when I started it to kind of when I finished it. So we work with lots of different clients, and it's always a two-way exchange, learning about, how does that client actually work, what makes things different for them, and adapting techniques around that. So that's me. Always have a QR code, they say. So there's my QR code. If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. It might say follow, but please try and connect. I always appreciate a connection. Right, so let's jump into, first of all, why do we get objections? So in one sense, it's a very healthy thing, getting an objection. It's a buyer exploring the challenges and the obstacles to change. They're thinking through the risks, but they're engaging with us. They're not doing this privately. They're presenting an objection. So they're surfacing their fears, is a good way to say it. And an objection means the buyer is uncomfortable, and also it reduces our ability to build trust. So that's one sense it being a healthy, a positive thing. There is another way to look at objections, which is in the new buyer enablement world. So, and I would encourage everybody that, Consensus are all about this new world of buyer enablement. And Garen Hess, the CEO, recently wrote a book called Selling is Hard, Buying is Harder, which is really the new Bible of buyer enablement. So in a buyer enablement world, or in the world of product-led growth, an objection, if you think about it, is a failure. Yeah, it's we failed to educate or prepare the buyer, and especially the internal champion, the client. We failed to give them the resources they needed. We failed to anticipate that this objection would happen, and we failed to anticipate the blockers and the challenges in the buying journey. Okay, so that's something to deeply think about. And as pre-sales, you're going to be very heavily involved in this if you've not done so before. This is almost kind of the role going into, almost like a marketing kind of role. It is creating the content that is actually going to be used in this new way of buying. So a great question is, what's the difference between a question and an objection? So jump to dictionary. The definition of an objection is an expression or feeling of disapproval or opposition. And, for all of us who do this role in pre-sales, we're in the profession and the craft. You, at some point or other, you've had an objection, haven't you? And how uncomfortable that actually is. So in a sales process, a way to describe an objection then is it's a sales or buying process blocker. Okay, it's something we have to overcome. It's not a kind of straight question. It's a blocker. We're going to have to overcome this like a gate, get over the gate to be able to kind of move things along in the sales process or the buying process. The other problem with a question versus an objection is the difference can sometimes be very subtle. So some questions will automatically lead to an objection. Okay? So I was thinking of an example from years ago, was somebody who asked a question about kind of user security, which in a lot of technology products is the one thing you never want to demo because it always looks awful. Someone asked something about that, which is a legitimate question, which turned into an objection because they said, and can you show me that? And at that point, it's an objection because that's the last thing you want to do. So a good example of what's a question then would be, actually, this is a spot the movie thing. Can I get this icon in cornflower blue? Absolutely. Don't know if Sammy, you know what movie that's from. That's from Fight Club. Anyway, so that's a straight question. Has got an immediate answer. You can say yes or no. So there's a definitive answer to the question. So you could say something like, yes, this is how you would do it. And here's how some of our other customers, this is how they also do it. Or no, we can't do it the way you described, but we have a partner who can help. And we've worked together at these customers. So that you can tell then the difference between a question and an objection. Now, I did promise to say, why are objections harder for pre-sales people? So our problem is we've been introduced as the technical, the business, the domain expert. We're supposed to know the answer. We're supposed to be able to demo anything that we've been asked. Now, if you'd been introduced to the client as a generalist, and a lot of salespeople will, the assumption is they're a generalist, clients' expectations are much lower. It would be more acceptable to say something like, well, I don't know the answer to that right now. I'll ask a colleague straight after this call and give you the answer. Okay. Unfortunately, we've been introduced as someone who can do it, who does know the answer and can, if there's a way you can demo it, can demo it. So the responsibility, the expectations are much, much higher for us. And that makes things like objections much more difficult for us to handle because we've got to think through what would happen if they did ask us to demo it. Now, objections themselves, they're really worth investing a huge amount of effort, and especially in this new buyer enablement world, or if you're in product-led growth, you want to prioritize the most critical objections. You want to craft, share, and practice the best responses. You want to make sure that you've prepared all your supporting materials, okay, supporting videos, case studies, handouts, an FAQ database. It's absolutely worth putting lots and lots of effort into this to smooth the whole kind of buying journey. And that's why I would say that, we're together for whatever it is, 40 minutes doing this, talking about objection handling. It is a much, much bigger topic that needs a lot more investment in time, and it is worth that investment in time. And especially if you're thinking about more the buyer enablement world where we've got to anticipate the objections are going to come and how to answer them. And remember that, in your role in pre-sales as a sales engineer, you've got all of the technical chops, you've got the business domain, the value chops, and you've got the communication skills. You're the right person to actually create these materials. One of the things I've got to put my hands up about, there's my hands up, about some of the introduction to this particular webinar is that I'm not sure how this happened, but some people did discuss about that. I would talk about your top 5 objections. I'm going to put my hands up straight away. I can't possibly know what your top 5 objections are in your particular, technical area. What I can say though is I can guess some of them. So, probably guess the top 4. How about that? It's like kind of, mind-bending, little kind of. The top one of them is going to be something to do with pricing, and it's a completely separate discussion to talk about that, because I recently did a poll on LinkedIn, and I asked pre-sales people, SEs, I said, what level of sales training do you think you need to do your job? 1/3 of the respondees said exactly the same sales training as salespeople, but 2/3 said the same sales training skills, but not closing. And my interpretation would be everything apart from anything, let's say, to do with money or contracts. And that certainly used to be the case. I've been in pre-sales a very long time, and it used to be almost from the beginning, I'll talk with anything with a client until it came to money. And that was always going to be a salesperson's job. But that's kind of changed. And again, this is a big topic that needs a completely different webinar, because you've now got technology companies who are definitely in a product-led growth space. You go to their website, pricing is very clearly signposted. You know exactly what it is. But they've still got kind of pre-sales people to kind of work in the enterprise space. So there are no salespeople sometimes to handle those pricing discussions. So, it falls on us to have those discussions ourselves. So that's one, is always going to be pricing. One is always going to be something to do with the pain of change. And we'll use that as a little bit of a scenario, an example a little bit later of an objection that is about the pain of change. One of the objections is definitely, this is a classic, is going to be coached by your competitor. My 30 plus years of pre-sales, I used to see this a lot. You'd get a client or a buyer would say, oh, yes, but what about this? And you go, hold on a minute, you didn't come up with that. That was pitched by, I now know this other competitor is in there, because that's the kind of thing, exactly the kind of language and objection they would put in place. So I'll bet you one of your top objections is actually has been coached. Your buyer's been coached by a competitor, and that tells you an awful lot. But also you need to anticipate that. You can't kind of approach these things new every single time. That is not the way to do it. Okay, it just creates stress, and buyers expect you to be a lot more professional than that. And the fourth one, this is a classic. This is kind of brand new kind of thing that everybody seems to forget, is that we've got all these new customer review sites. Well, G2, Capterra, they've actually been around quite a long while. Is that one of the objections could actually be in plain sight. We know buyers are doing all this kind of independent research on their own. We know that they're doing that, so why wouldn't they go into these customer review sites? And if they spot a review that's less than complimentary, why wouldn't they bring that up as an objection? So that's in plain sight. And to be honest, if you don't know what your reviews are on G2 and Capterra, you should be doing it straight after this call and finding them out, because that might suddenly reveal why you get certain types of objections. So that's four I can think of. It will be different for you. Different types of competitors, might have multiple ones to do with pain of change, or you might be in a new market where a lot of objections are just to do with, that it's so new and people are uncomfortable and adverse to risk. Again, that's worth a separate session, and would be something you'd have to do, each company one-to-one. Right, so that's that as an introduction. Let's jump into pause to get started. So what is pause? What's happening when you do the first thing, pause? That's not you, Sammy, is it? That's by the way, something I learned just from PowerPoint has got all these cutout characters that are in the icon section, that have all these different emotions and body poses. If you didn't know that was there, I only just found out. It was brilliant. I'm going to use it all the time now. So pause. So pause there's two aspects to pausing. One is it's about being respectful to the person who's asking the question and managing your own emotions. So it's a pause after a client speaks. Be silent. Don't interrupt them. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So what you're hoping is, will the person making the objection, will it volunteer some additional information? If you leave a gap, they might add on a bit more interpretation to the objection. And if you're lucky, will someone else from the client help out or contribute, especially if that objection is mixed with, difficulties with change management within the client. But personally as well. So this is about managing your flight, fright, and freeze response. So we're all human, and it's your body's automatic reaction to protect us from threat and danger. And it kicks in these stressful situations. And think about it, you're usually already in a stressful situation when you get an objection. Okay, doing demos, customer presentations, they are stressful. Everybody, I mean, I've been doing it 30 years. I still get stressed. And I think that's actually quite healthy and respectful of the situation you're about to go into. Okay, so give yourself time to manage your emotions and calm down. The other thing is, don't take it personally. These are never, they're never personal, these objections. Okay, the generic things. So give yourself time and space. Now, how long to pause? Most people seem to recommend pausing or being silent for maybe something like 3 to 5 seconds. But it actually depends on geography. It could be even shorter than that where you are. And there's a lot of geographies and cultures where you could get away with maybe like 8 seconds. Respect, people are more used to pauses in conversations. So the way to test this out is try, for your geography and culture, try pausing with a colleague in a conversation and work out how long does it take before it gets weird. Yeah. Is that too long? Okay. That felt like a minute for me, but it was only probably 3 seconds or so. Now, there's an interesting thing to do with language with pausing and interrupting as well that I've discovered over the years. Native English speakers, despite observations I am, native English speakers, we interrupt other people quite regularly. Okay, it's actually part of our kind of speech patterns, how we do conversations, and the reason we can do that is the meaning in an English sentence is determined quite early. Some other languages are constructed differently, and they can appear to be more respectful to each other, but the reason is because the true meaning of the sentence, perhaps the verb part of it, doesn't appear until right at the end of the sentence. So German is a really good example of this. So I suppose naively, I've spent a lot of time working in Germany, and I always thought these are very respectful people. They do interrupt each other now and again, but it's actually quite hard to do it because the real meaning doesn't reveal itself until the end of a sentence. And as English speakers, we just get used to finishing each other's sentence. So stop doing that, okay? Stop doing that, pause, get used to, even if it's uncomfortable, get used to that pause, okay? It's really important that you do that. Okay, so the I is about interest. So show interest in what they've just said. Be genuinely curious in what they've said. Show empathy. Practice active listening. Be willing to learn more. Do not jump straight into what you think the answer is. Okay, start a conversation. And it could be just as simple as saying, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about this? So I have to big shout out to Mel Harms. So I saw Mel, there was a sales skills trainer at Oracle, and he said this great thing is if you don't remember anything at all about objection handling, if you can't remember what pitch stands for, or how it works, the thing, at least remember to be genuinely curious. Okay, be genuine about it, as in, I am really interested in what you've just said. Can you tell me more? Use it as a learning opportunity. Okay, if you're empathetic and genuine about it, you learn so much. You can get through many objections just like that. Don't fight back against an objection, because you're not going to win. The client will just entrench their opinion. And like I said before, do not take them personally. So breathe. I've got an objection, calm down and think. It's all about understanding the objection. So where are they coming from? What's their perspective of this? Now, there are some interesting and important techniques that some people use at this stage. One of them is called mirroring. So you might say, I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Okay, there's a little bit of NLP in that, neuro linguistic programming. So, and mirroring can show comfort, trust, and rapport. Another technique is to repeat back the key words. So an objection could be, it looks quite complicated, which we're going to meet in a minute. It looks quite complicated. And you can say, can you tell me more about why it looks complicated? Just, using the word back to them. They've got an objection, oh, we're frustrated with this. So you find it frustrating, okay? Now, you might already think, ooh, dear, that's a bit mechanistic, isn't it? Some of these objection handling techniques, they call this echo. There is a lot of theory behind the psychology of this. It does work. The challenge with this is it takes a lot of training, a lot of workshopping and coaching to be really comfortable with these techniques. As you can see there, it can be very obvious of what you're doing if all you do is just echo the objection back. Okay, it's just like, hold on a minute, you've just saying back what I've just said. You know, you're not adding any value to the conversation. And if that's spotted, you can lose rapport, trust, and you can even anger the buyer by just getting this wrong. So it's much better to be more natural about it and realize at this stage, you're just trying to show empathy. You're just being interested. And like I keep saying, just be genuinely curious as to the client's situation and their viewpoint. Why have you got that particular viewpoint? So that's the interest stage. Now you'll notice I've got another I, which is called intent. Now, intent is all about digging beneath the question or the objection. What do they really mean? Many people haven't fully thought through a question or an objection when they ask it. So your job is to help them, is to guide the conversation to what's sitting beneath this. What's the real problem here? What really is your perspective here? So think about who's asking the question. What's their position in the company? Is this somebody who's going to be a user and their perspective would be, ooh, I can't actually see myself using this, or is it someone who's higher up the organization who's thinking about training needs, or, try and think through their eyes. It's kind of empathy, and that'll help guide you to what is it that they want as a response. So are they an influencer? Are they an executive? Are they a user, an economic buyer? Each of these different levels of people have different value propositions and personal value propositions that they fit in there. Certainly a user of let's say, a new process, their personal value proposition might be, do I still get to finish at 5 p.m. and pick the kids up from kindergarten? Okay, so because if it is more complicated, if there's more clicks, it's going to take me longer. And frustrating as that might be, that's what you're going to have to overcome. That's what the hidden intent is. So let's say they say, I'm worried about how complex this looks. Are they going to be using the user interface themselves? If not, what would their concern be? Is it something to do with training investment? Now, the next I is the biggie. Okay, implications. This is where it changes from being something a salesperson could use to proper technical selling. So, and this is the part of pitch that's the hardest. This is where you need to think about 100 miles an hour faster than you're talking or listening. Okay, implications isn't actually a step in the buyer conversation, which everything else is. It's really what you should have been thinking about when you are actually going through pause, interest, and intent. Okay, is implications thinking about what can I do to answer this? What will happen next? If I answer this in a certain way, will they immediately respond with, that's great, can you demo it? So at this stage in pitch, PIITCH, you need to work out what you're going to do next and what could happen if you give a particular answer. So like legitimately, will they want me to demo how we solve the issue? I've said the words, but they've said, okay, show me. Okay. Do I know how to demo it? Is that instance working today? Did I test it this morning? Okay, really risky if you didn't. Okay, is the right demo data in place? Okay, this is a chemicals company, and the only data I've got in place is motorbikes. Okay, they're not going to be very happy about that. Is someone else using the demo at the moment? If I demo a particular workflow, is that going to screw things up for them? There's all kinds of things you need to be thinking. Like I said, you need to be thinking about 100 miles an hour. So sometimes as well, even if you could demo the solution, you shouldn't. And I'll just stop there, because a lot of people kind of go who are in pre-sales, and you perhaps got a more technical, role within pre-sales, who go, Don, what are you talking about? If you can demo it, you should, shouldn't you? Well, actually, there are scenarios where you shouldn't. It should be the last thing you do. So we're pre-sales, aren't we? We're helpful people. We're proud of our knowledge. And for many of us, we might be itching to show our technical skills, our technical chops. But here's what to think, right? Who else is in the meeting? Okay. Are they going to be interested if I demo the answer and I take 10 minutes over it? Okay. What will it do to the agenda or the roadmap? I prefer it to be called a roadmap if I try and answer the question. So critically, there's research that says at least 12% of any kind of sales meeting should be dedicated to next steps. You can find that research from gong.io. So what that tells you is you never, ever can overrun. You've always got to make sure you've got to have that next steps kind of bookend, as it were, in any kind of sales conversation, because it's the next steps conversation that creates the sales velocity. It's not the fact that you used all the time up and shown them your technical chops, because that's called teaching. Again, we don't do teaching, do we? We do demonstrating, which means we're talking about value and we're sensitive to the fact that there is a sales process. So never, ever overrun. And, you know, if you're going to demo something that's very user-centric, and there's only one user in the meeting, in the Zoom, let's say, and everyone else is an executive level, guess how many other people are going to lose interest? And you don't want to do that either, okay? So other things you should be thinking about is, let's say, if I'm going to use the example of another client, do I know enough about the experience of a recent client, you know, where we can talk about the fact that this particular objection was overcome there? Do I know that? So will I need a case study? Do I need a video? Is there a reference call that we can set up? You know, if it's something to do with training, do I need someone who's a training consultant? Do I need to set up a meeting for them? You know, what is it I need to do? You need to be thinking about all of this all the way from the point that they raise the objection. You know, in one way, everything that's come before has just given you time to think through the implications. Okay, so what have I got pre-prepared already? What's the best resource to counter the objection? And also, even how will I negotiate its use of a resource? The fact that I'm not going to show you how this works right now. You know, is there a way I can negotiate my way around it? And you might say something like, "Look, I know your time is precious. Can I send you a 90-second video that explains all this? I can send you the video later this afternoon. I'd be very happy to handle any questions you might have after you've seen it." Okay, that's a great way to kind of negotiate. It's empathetic. Your time is precious. 90 seconds is not a lot of time to ask of someone, and really your kind of like FAQ video database of, you know, things like training issues and things, you shouldn't really be any longer than that anyway. And make sure you've got some, you know, customer examples and quotes in there. So we move on to then tell, which is now I've learned everything and now know, I've decided, I've gone through the implications, I now know what's going to happen next, what I can offer, what resources I've got. Now I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. So tell the answer or whatever you're going to do next. And there are some really interesting techniques you can use at this stage. One of them is called feel, felt, found. So you could say, I understand how you feel about this, and many of our other customers felt the same way, but what they found was this, something different. Yeah. So that's a great thing. Don't get caught using the words feel, felt, found. Use something different. There's too many people know about that already. So, and you could say what they found was that minimal training was needed. Our customers say the user interface is actually quite intuitive, and there is a pop-up mini video help at each stage. Almost all our customers were up and running and being productive within an hour or so. Okay, that's a great kind of tell. So finally, and this is missing from quite a few objection handling techniques, finally, you must check that you did answer the question. So do not move on until you've checked and you've had a positive answer. Okay, so if there's any doubt that you haven't answered the question, stop, apologize, mea culpa, it's always my fault. You know, I'm sorry I didn't, you know, perhaps I wasn't listening carefully enough, you know, didn't understand exactly what you were saying. Ask to have the question explained again and go back to the interest stage. Okay, so that's the point of checking. Okay, so if the buyer tells you and you still haven't answered the question after the second go round, so you went back to interest and worked your way through again, just stop at that point. There's some kind of communication issue that's gone wrong. It's not working between you. So you have to stop at that point and just perhaps set up a one-to-one call. Okay, you're taking too much time if you go around a third time. Okay, right. So that's all the theory done. Sammy, are you there? There she is, back on camera. There you go.
I'm here.
Right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. Okay, so let's try this out with a real example, and we'll do round about the right timing. So just want to point out something. You're not really going to see me stop to do implications, because as I've told you, the implications part of it is what you should have been thinking all the time from hearing the objection through pause, through interest, and the dig, digging for the intent. Okay, so you won't see me stop on implications. I will be just working my way straight through that. Right, so let me introduce you to Sammy. Hey, Sammy.
Hey,
now,
everybody.
Sammy is head of business transformation at an energy company. Okay, so that's a really high up position. So Sammy runs a large IT department. Now, it's really important that you remember this for what happens next. So think about how Sammy might approach this objection that's going to come through. Think about, is Sammy going to be a user? Or a manager of a person who's using it, or is an executive, someone who's much higher up, up the organization, and might have a different perspective on what happens next. Okay, so where we are, we're in the middle of a demo, and Sammy has an objection. So, an apologies to Salesforce. You'll see what I mean in a minute. I'm starting, and here we go. And you can see how easy it is to navigate around the
John,
Salesforce.
can I stop you there?
Yeah.
That looks really complicated to me.
Okay, that's a really important question. Can you please tell me a little bit more about that?
I personally haven't used tools like this before, so I'm a little bit worried about the complexity, and there's just an awful lot going on that screen.
I understand, yeah. So can I ask, is your major concern about this how long it will take your team to be productive using the schema builder?
Right. To get a workable return on investment, we need to be up, running, and productive as soon as possible. We have a long backlog of developments we need to build out on our Salesforce platform.
I completely understand. Yeah, this is urgent. Yeah, you need people to be productive as soon as possible. So I understand how you feel about this. Many of our other customers felt the same way when they first saw the schema builder. But what they found was that the user interface, it really was intuitive. And the fact that it's integrated into Salesforce meant that it was a huge improvement on their current data modeling tools. They had multiple tools to do the same thing. So we also have our world famous Trailhead training courses, and there's context sensitive help inside the tool, and even mini pop-up videos at each stage. Almost all of our customers were up and running and being productive within an hour or so. I'm just thinking, we've got a video where a couple of our customers talk about the training experience and how long it took them to master the tools. Could I send that video to you straight after this meeting?
Yeah, that would be great.
So did that answer the question?
It did. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Okay, so let's move on to look at how we would create custom apps in Salesforce. Okay, and we're out. Okay, so that was pretty quick, and you saw me doing the pause thing there. What was your experience of that, Sammy? Did it feel kind of real?
Yeah, felt pretty real to me. Felt good.
Okay.
I felt like you heard what I was saying and responded to my concerns. For sure.
Okay, yeah. The obvious thing I missed out there was explaining what my thinking was in the implications section, but I'm sure if you kind of press rewind and go back a little bit and think through what I must have been thinking while we were first heard the objection, the pause, the interest and the intent, what resources have I got? What other customers have felt the same way? What constructive answer can I make that it is going to convince Sammy? And also the thinking I was doing about, well, what's Sammy's position here? She's not going to be a user of this, so the intent, there must be something else going on here. Okay, and I explored that, and even suggested there was a bit of influencing going on there as well. Is your real concern, is that actually more to do with the training, the investment in training, how long it's going to be? And I got Sammy to talk about this is what we want to do with it. It was all brilliant stuff that really helps the with the return on investment and convincing moving towards a close. So let's I think actually we're kind of getting, we need to talk about this, how not to get objections in the first place. We've kind of talked about a little bit about this already, which is in the new world of buyer enablement, it's actually a failure to get objections. If you've got new objections, novel ones that you've not heard before, that's completely fair enough. But if it's one that you've heard before, that's not good. Okay. And if we're going to be talking about scaling pre-sales, being more efficient and effective with your time, because there's not many of you out there, no one's going to be able to kind of recruit lots of people, to multiply you out. We've got to be more efficient and effective in what we do. Okay. So if one of the things we can do is anticipate objections before they happen and make sure that we've built some high quality resources but they're authentic. So not kind of like, excuse the expression, marketing speak, but actually things that have come from you, the authentic, credible, someone who's an expert in this, who understands how other customers use this technology and the experiences that they've got. Okay. And that's that's what your job is. You're able to do this. So how not to get objections in the first place is anticipate them. Okay. Build content, build videos, crowdsource, do a poll internally. What are your top 5 objections? Have you got content already kind of like built for that you feed to the buyers champions well before they anticipate that objection? And remember as well, they're selling for you. You can't sell anymore in modern kind of organizations. It's your buyer champion that's doing it on your behalf, because they're reaching buyers that you will never ever get to speak to, kind of influencers you will never get to speak to. So you've got to make sure that they're enabled up front and have got the answers. Here's the top 5 things I'm anticipating you've got an objection to, that you're going to be worried about, and making sure I've got those resources built up front. So how not to get objections in the first place? Prepare for it. It's always about preparation. Okay, so I think we're kind of getting towards kind of looking at if there's any questions there. Always make sure you get your QR code there. And just as a reminder, what does pitch stand for? It's pause. I mean, almost we could turn the audio on and get you all to do it back to me. It's pause. Okay, 3 seconds or so. Be respectful. Interest. I am interested. I'm genuinely curious in what you've just said. Intent. Guide the conversation. What's underneath that question? What is it? How does this connect to a personal value proposition? And then all the time you're thinking through implications, like what have I got in my toolkit? What can I do? Am I going to have to set up a separate meeting? Can I negotiate a way of using a resource, a video, whatever it is, an opportunity to speak to an existing customer? Can I use that as a way of overcoming the objection and getting them to spend their own time, watching a video, whatever, and helping accelerate, helping them move forward the sales, the buying kind of process. Okay. And then telling, this is what I'm going to do, and checking, always check, did that really answer the question? And if it didn't, it's your fault. Okay. I would always apologize and say, okay, that's my fault. I've misunderstood what you've said. Can you please explain it to me again? Perhaps in a different way, and let me see if I can truly understand what you've just said. Okay. And for a bit of fun, if you do play Scrabble in English, it's make sure you do the full 14 points. Hopefully you've seen, you can't skip bits of this. You have to do each bit in sequence or it doesn't really work. So there we go. Right. And I think, I don't know if there are any questions, but I'm hoping there are.
Yeah. So just wanted to send out a reminder to the audience. On the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A box. And if you click that, that's how you can ask us questions, and we'll be able to ask them to Dawn live right here and now. So we'll give you guys a couple minutes to throw some questions in the Q&A box. And yeah, but Dawn, thank you so much. I feel like that presentation was super well received by the audience. We have some folks participating with us in the chat box. I know Adam said that diagram was very chaotic, and I completely agree, but I think Dawn handled that pretty well.
It's real. I'm afraid it's real.
That's scary, but I could see how someone could be overwhelmed by that for sure. All right. Let's see. We have some people just saying that you were great. Thank you, Dawn. Great approach, straightforward and effective. We love to see it. Great information, excellent presentation. Thanks guys so much for throwing this feedback in the chat box. We did just have one question come through. Thoughts on marking some of the objections as follow-up items versus trying to answer them then and there?
Yeah, always a good one. So ideally, you would always try and answer it there and then, because if you, in the old days, we'd always talk about parking an objection, and then there would be lots of discussion about should it go on like a whiteboard to actually sketch it up, or should the salesperson be keeping a catalog of these things. But it was always the case that the more things that you park, it just seemed the more riskier you were. It was like, gosh, these things, especially if you're being really open about it, and they start mounting up in a meeting, you've got 5 or 6 things that we're parking until later. It really doesn't look good. So there's always going to be, the right thing to do is if you can answer it there and then you should. And that helps build rapport. It helps build trust. It helps establish credibility. But like I said, sometimes there are situations where, let's say you've only got 10 minutes to go, somebody's asked you a question which you'd love to show them the answer to because you've got this brilliant solution, and it's all ready to go, but it takes 10 minutes to show it. And there's only 10 minutes left. Okay, you've got to swallow your pride. Is that it's not about you and you showing them and your technical chops. It's about the fact that in the end, this is still a sales process and you need to continue the commercial velocity. So even if you could, you shouldn't, because you got to make sure you do that next steps. Okay. So it's a difficult one. If you can do, but be very sensitive to who else is in the audience. How many other people are going to be interested in this? And like the example I gave, there was one user and then everyone else is an exec, and the user says, can you show me how you do this particular workflow? The right answer might be, can we do that separately? So just be sensitive to the audience and where you are on the agenda and where you are in the sales process.
Great point. Yep. Okay. What do you find the most effective in coaching members of your team on objection handling?
Well, practice, rehearsal. Some people talk about, was it every other week? Is that you actually have I don't know if it's like a lunch and learn or whatever, but you have as part of your team call, you do, right, let's do an objection each time. And, and pick one person you come up with, right, here's the current answer. Is the current way we answer it. Can we iterate? Is there a better way of doing it from what we've found, using this out in the field? But it's all about practicing it, because what you want to do really for your top 5, start with your top 5, but eventually your top 10 objections, is basically be so super comfortable with how to answer it because you've practiced it. And rehearse the answer, and know where all the resources are, know exactly what to do, that actually there's no stress involved. You welcome the objection. You're going to go, that one. No, that's the one our competitor pitched, isn't it? Luckily I've got this amazing video that I can send to you, 90-second video that shows you that's not the case at all. And in fact, felt found. I understand how you feel about that, but actually our customers, they've felt a different way, and this is what they found. Okay. By the way, that is a really powerful construct.
Yeah, love that. Any suggestions on how to handle price objections if our sales reps typically handle all of the pricing discussions?
That is an interesting one, because traditionally in a pre-sales role, you probably wouldn't get involved in that. And the way salespeople are taught about this is you shouldn't have price conversations until you've had a value conversation. And because if you've had a value conversation, the pricing not quite becomes an irrelevance, but they can see that, they get X times more value out of it than they do from the pricing. But, but if you do get, if it is your role to do that, you could ask questions like, what are you comparing the pricing with? Are you trying to compare Salesforce with a Netflix subscription? So I just thought of that. I bet some people do go, this is expensive, isn't it? I thought software things we subscribe to normally cost, like $9.99 or something. Okay, and some people might think that. They're thinking, consumer purchases versus the business world, which is, might be happening a lot more now that we've got a lot more consumer behaviors coming into it. And it's definitely, the pricing thing is something you all need to work out beforehand and have practiced. If that comes up, Are you going to handle it? You pass it off to somebody else. If you are going to handle it, make sure you've got all the resources there. Some companies won't do any kind of discounting whatsoever. You know, the price it says on the website is the standard price that everybody pays, and there is no discounting, you know, or, you know, pointing people to the tools that prove that the value, you know, that's definitely, you know, in the theory of this stuff, that's definitely the way you're supposed to do it. Don't talk about pricing until the end. But you say we've got 30 seconds more. There's a little catch-all to this, which is that the more you understand about the new kind of, you know, buyer enablement, product-led growth world, the more you realize that actually you need to talk about pricing right at the beginning. And I think Gong have got some great research that go, if you've talked about pricing, I think it's the second meeting, and you will be much more successful because people have already got it in their head how much this is going to cost. And in product-led growth kind of world, it's all on the website anyway. It's obvious what the price is, and hopefully by the time that they meet you, they've done all that research and are comfortable with the pricing already. We're in a really strange world at the moment where kind of an enterprise space, you know, people challenging pricing, and at the other level, there's people that they're already comfortable with it because, you know, it was the second thing that was talked about.
Right. Any tips in dealing with a decidedly antagonistic person who is constantly raising objections? Maybe they're a fan of the competition.
Yeah, that you do meet people like that. Yeah, real pain in the derriere. You know, there are kind of, it's probably outside of this to kind of go into techniques to kind of, you know, isolate them and separate them out. But it all depends on who else is in the audience. Is there people who know that this person's going to do that? Is it, you know, finding out something about them beforehand? Like if you spoke to you kind of in the internal champion, would they volunteer this person's always like this? And, you know, typically they don't mind you handling it in this certain way, but, you know, always be respectful of it, of someone and what they've said. If you can, try and separate it out into separate one-to-ones where you kind of address the, you know, the particular issues that they've got, you know, so it's kind of divide and conquer. If you can take them out of the mix and carry on with the presentation with the rest of the audience, that will be a lot better. You know, what you might find is this person is well known for doing it, and, you know, if you talk, you know, do a bit of politicking, a bit of empathy with the internal champion, they might tell you this is what this person does. He normally does it. This is how to handle them. Or even better, you could ask them, if this person does this, could you handle it on our behalf? That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. All right, we have a couple more questions. Hopefully we can get to all of them. If we can't get to all of them, guys, just so you know, we'll send all the remaining questions over to Don and he can respond individually if it makes sense. So keep submitting your questions and we will try to get to all of them.
Yep. And you can ping me on LinkedIn as well, messaging, no problem.
There you go. Use that QR code, guys. The challenger mindset has been a popular and effective sales technique. When during pitch would you leverage this approach?
Yeah, so teach, tailor, take control. The challenge is really interesting because it was genuinely probably the first new idea to come into, you know, kind of sales methodologies in a very long time. So, you know, I probably like a lot of people is we've spent a lot of time kind of looking at it. What's really interesting with it though is that, you know, if you know challenging, you'll know things like, you know, T-shaped funnels and pipelines, but you'll also understand the teach, tailor, take control thing. So that's something that happens right at the beginning, and it's almost been you know, deliberately provocative and kind of, you know, taking, like I said, teaching and taking control of things. What's really interesting with Challenger though is that you know, a lot of people, they do that right at the beginning, but what you find is that they kind of evolve into like solution selling as they kind of move through the rest of the sales cycle. Certainly by mid-funnel, you're probably not doing that kind of teach, tailor, take control stuff anymore. You're back into solution selling. I don't know if that was ever the intention with Challenger, probably not. But that seems to be what happens in most companies when I talk about it. But you're right. So objection handling and what Challenger is doing is very, very kind of similar techniques. You're deliberately challenging and, you know, handling objections and trying to get a relationship where, you know, you're seen as someone who can teach, who's, has perspectives that are of value to them, and can bring, fresh ideas. So I think they're kind of similar. There'll be some similar techniques and things in there, but I think the kind of objection handling I'm talking about is probably a little bit later in the sales cycle, if that's one way of explaining it.
Right. How to best handle software glitches in a demo?
Right. Number one, ignore it. No, honestly, you remember how, when we're presenting, we're super stressed and everything, something that happens in 3 seconds feels like 3 minutes. Okay. A lot of the truth is, you've got to realize this, right? A lot of this is like video yourself and you'll realize the truth. A lot of software glitches, the audience didn't notice it. You're probably the only one who noticed that took longer than it normally does. Oh, that pop-up doesn't normally pop there. Don't say the words, just go silent over the top of it and carry on, because they don't know any different. Okay. And we all know that will get fixed in the next scrum. Yeah. So the first thing with them is ignore it. Okay. Only if it's a real showstopper, like, proper crash, and gonna just be honest. By the way, you should have your plan B and plan C ready, by the way. There are lots of tools out there that will screen scrape demos. And perhaps if you absolutely want to have a live demo, you should have that as a plan B. And plan C would just be having screenshots. And plan D, if you can't do any technologies, just sit down and have a conversation. Yeah.
Oh,
so yeah. But most of the time, just ignore it. Don't say anything about it because they haven't seen it.
I love that advice. I think it's really smart. You're right. They most of the time they haven't seen it.
No.
Awesome. Any additional tips on how to handle a demo that becomes more of an implementation project?
Well, actually, that is a really good sign. If that's happened, that is really good. I mean, I would almost just close the, well, in the old days, if it was face-to-face, you'd close the laptop down and have a discussion. But I'd stop sharing anything and just start having a discussion about it. They've obviously mentally moved on from what the technology does to the challenges of, how to implement it. And that's a brilliant conversation. So stop showing them anything. We've moved on. They trust you. They're convinced. They think you're credible. You've obviously built enough rapport with them. So stop showing them any tech. Just have an honest conversation with them. And I always recommend that as well. Don't do kind of like, marketing case studies where everything worked well every single time. That's not the real world. Be of an honest conversation, talk about a recent client, and because they know some of the things will go wrong, like training didn't happen when it was supposed to, we were going to do this piece of change management, we had to do it after the implementation. They understand things like have an honest conversation with them, but essentially, if that's what's happened, well done to you.
Very true. Great point. All right. We are just nearing the top of the half hour. So Don, I just want to thank you so much for your time today and sharing your expertise with everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us. If there were any questions, it seems like there's maybe 1 or 2 in the box. I'll forward those on to Don. And as he mentioned as well, you can always connect with him on LinkedIn. I'm going to push the link to the DemoFest registration again in the chat box. And we really hope to see you guys in a few weeks at DemoFest. So thanks so much again, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Bye.